So in this video, I wanted to cover a few things. First thing being obviously bike fitting and whether £500 is worth it for a bike fit. Secondly being whether I think you should go and get a bike fit. And third, I really wanted to go in depth into why I decided to get a bike fit and what my problems were on a bike and what I was suffering with on a bike. And then the solutions that we basically came to solving them. I've been having a few issues for a while now on a bike, and it's been aggravating me so much to the point where I didn't even want to go out and ride a bike anymore, because every time I'd go out and ride, I'd be thinking about the pains or the feelings or the discomfort that I was basically having on a bike. I've been having these issues for probably like 6 to 8 months. I've spent a lot of time on YouTube and on Google trying to figure out myself what I was doing wrong, what my bike was doing wrong, where I was going wrong. I spent a lot of time filming myself, trying to figure it out. And basically, I would get it to a point where it felt a little bit better, but never to the point where I felt complete comfort on a bike. I've got races coming up very, very shortly. In fact, one in 2.5 weeks, Outlaw Half Nottingham, which I need to be comfy and ready to push some decent power on the bike. After doing a little bit of research, I found a company called Foundation Fit. They're located in the Lee Valley Velo Park. It's a mouthful to say. And yeah, they're, like I said, their bike fits are worth £500 or £495, I believe, which is a lot of money, especially for a bike fit, because in fact, it's probably one of the most expensive bike fits that I've found on the internet. And I'm going to be completely honest on this video, and I want to make sure I get across whether I think that's expensive for a bike fit, whether it's worth it for a bike fit. Did it solve my problems? After doing a lot of research and watching a lot, probably like every video on YouTube about bike fitting, they're great, and they tell you, quite generic stuff in terms of positions and stuff. But my issue, I think, was a lot more in depth, and I needed a professional to look at me. I couldn't use them videos to diagnose my problem. Let's start with my discomfort and symptoms, I suppose. So the big one that was annoying me most was right hip pain at the front of my hip. It's kind of like it felt like an overuse of my hip muscle, or like my hip flexor maybe. Within like 10, 15 minutes on a bike, I could feel that muscle aggravated. That was the first one. The second one is I sometimes got right knee pain. After doing a lot of research on YouTube and playing around with my position a little bit, I did manage to ease that quite a bit, but it was still there. The other things that I got were basically saddle soreness. So on the left hand side of my body, I would get a lot of, not saddle sores, but pressure on the left side of the saddle. My right knee would hit the top tube a lot. It would, if I kind of didn't force my knee out, it would smack the top tube quite a bit. My left foot also used to go numb, like really quickly, 20 minutes, it'd be numb. I also just had the sensation that I never sat like square on a saddle. I never felt connected to the bike. I never felt like I could really push the pedals without worrying about what my limbs are doing, where I'm sat, where I'm positioned, wherever I'm, basically just never felt comfy on a bike at all. I come to the conclusion after videoing myself a lot that I'd sit off to the left-hand side of the bike. So I'd sit sort of skewed like this on a bike, which would make sense with all the kind of symptoms, I suppose, that I've been having. And when I used to do efforts on the bike, it was my right quad would like kind of blow up first, and then in my left hand side I'd feel it a lot in my hamstring and my glute. And that's all good, well and good me knowing that I do that, but I had no idea how to fix that or why I was doing that or where, what was causing that basically. So I then basically went and contacted Foundation Fit, got booked in, and then me and my other half took the hour drive down there to go get a bike fit. So the session lasted 4 hours, and I'm going to try and do my best to run you through in as much detail as I can what we did and how we came to the bottom of some of these issues. So the first thing that we did was kind of just have a conversation. Basically, at Foundation Fit, you fill in a pre-fit questionnaire just so they can get an idea of your bike. You give your bike size, your bike make, loads of details about the symptoms that you've been having, about what your goals and aims are, how many hours you train, all that sort of stuff, so they can kind of get an idea as to where you're at and what you're expecting from the bike fit. The fitter that fitted me was his name was Matt. Really nice guy, really knowledgeable. After having a bit of a discussion about what my goals are and where I'm at. We then put me onto my current position on this bike. Don't know if you can see that, but the Giant Trinity. And then from there, we shot some footage of kind of what's going on. Matt had a look and instantly was like, yep, there's some big issues here. I was basically all the things that I just explained. So I was sat skewed. I was, doing one thing that he noticed a lot as well, which I never would have picked up on, nor did any of these videos on YouTube suggest that you'd pick up on, which is why it's so important to go and get a professional look at you, because individually we're all very different. So there's no generic advice out there that would have noticed this, but he noticed that my right hip would sort of, as my knee would come in, it would cause my right shoulder to kind of come up like that. And I'd kind of almost like shift over to the left-hand side. I'm kind of doing this, I don't know if you can see that, but basically I kind of would like drop my left shoulder and then kind of shift over. And I would do this like every time I pedal. That was one thing he noticed. The second thing he noticed was that my actual hands were like shifting around a lot. And that is, he said, was a sign that you're not comfortable. If you're comfortable, your hands should just sit and kind of be sat there and not need to feel the need to move. He was pretty quick to identify that basically my position wasn't right. After that, we then went on to basically doing some like body assessment stuff. So basically went through some exercises to figure out whether my body was causing any limitations to where I could be on a bike, if that makes sense. So we did some single leg like squat, single leg balance test. We did some step ups, we did some squats, we did some like loads of different things basically just to assess my body. From that, we basically discovered that my balancing was okay. Like I wasn't too bad balancing on one leg. The left side was definitely more stable than the right side. So when we did like a single leg squat from seated, the alignment and stability was better on my left side than it was on my right. We kind of discovered, or I should say Matt discovered, that this is likely coming from a bit of like non-active glute, also a bit of potential instability in my ankle. Also from that, he could tell that my right quad was having to compensate for that lack of stability, which would obviously indicate that when I'm sat on a bike and I get my right quad burns out first, that could be why, because it's unstable. The right side of my body is unstable on a bike. We also found out that my hamstrings were quite tight, not like horrendous, but they were definitely tight. And also just generally in my hip area was a little bit tight. We did some flexibility tests, and basically when I were to go into a deep squat, rather than using my hips and hamstrings and quads and stuff to get my body into a good squat position, I basically just kind of arched my lower back a lot. And sort of, basically all the flexibility was coming from my lower back rather than my hips and hamstrings. So that's definitely something that I needed to work on. I then basically kind of just stood in a neutral position, and we found out that my right shoulder was actually sitting slightly higher than my left. So I'd sort of stand a little bit like this, which again would make sense with how I sit on a bike. Because when I pedal, Matt was saying that I shift my right shoulder up and sort of over, which again kind of all made sense. We then looked at my shoes. Let me grab them. I've got these Physique shoes. They are really, really good shoes, expensive shoes, so I didn't really want to have to change them. And inside of them, again, after looking at YouTube videos, everyone says that these G8 inner soles are some of the best inner soles that you can get. So I've already put these on. I've got medium to high arches, so we kind of, we didn't need to do much of the inner soles because I've kind of already fixed that problem. What we did do though is my cleats were already quite far back on the shoe, but I did have room to go even further back, so we pushed them as far back on the shoe as they could go. I thought I had them in a good position, but he said that there's no harm in pushing them even further back, especially for triathlon. So we did that, which helped with a bit of foot stability. Now, the last thing that we tested for when we were doing these sort of basic tests was for a leg length difference. Now, this is something that I was very curious about because before this session, that's kind of where I basically limited down to what my issues could be or be coming from. So we did actually end up finding that my right leg is 5 to 6 mil longer than my left leg. Now this could be a structural or functional difference. Structural being actually your bone is longer, functional being that your body is making your right leg seem like that. So having said that, we then decided to put a shim under my left cleat. We used a 3 mil shim to see if that would basically make any difference. Once we've done all of that, we then kind of got onto the bike again. We replicated the position from my Giant onto their jig, basically so it felt like I was on my bike. Now that is kind of where all the interesting stuff started happening, because on a jig, you're basically able to change everything within seconds as you're riding. So it means it gives you like instant feedback from one position compared to another. One thing that we noticed when I was on my bike in the first clips that we took was that my left leg actually extends more than my right leg, which again would mean, would indicate basically that my leg is short, my left leg is shorter than my right leg. So what we decided to do was take the shim out of the shoe, get me pedaling to see if that's basically to see if putting the shim back in the shoe would then kind of even things out and make it a bit better, which it did. It was definitely instantly that made a difference. The next thing that we did was starting to play around with saddle height to get the most optimum saddle height. Now we kind of tested lowering it, putting it back to where it currently was, hiring it. We kind of messed around from the whole, like a whole range really, to see what felt best, what looked best, and also what sounded best. That was one of the key things that Matt was mentioning, is the sound of how you're kind of cranking. So it's not choppy, it's not like, you know, speeding up through the cycle or anything. It's like one smooth motion. We found that basically 1 centimeter lower than what I had it was my optimal position. So we lowered the saddle by 10 mil compared to what was on my current bike. We also tested for saddle fore aft. So we ended up moving the saddle forward slightly, which felt best, which also both of them help open up your hip as well a little bit. So that obviously made a big difference. The next thing that we tested was once you kind of got the saddle in the right place, we then tested the front end. We tested basically the arm cups. I've got mine really quite narrow for aero reasons. We tested slightly wider. We tested, and then we kind of came back in. We would do that a few times to compare. We tested a bit further forward, a bit further back, and we ultimately found that my kind of setup was okay. It wasn't too bad. It felt comfy. I was able to breathe. So we left that alone. That was all fine. We then tested the height of the whole front end. We ended up finding that where I kind of had it was, whilst it was okay and it felt comfy, I think it was closing my hip angle a little bit too much, which again was causing kind of like a shift over a bit. We ended up going up by 20 mil in total in the end, so 2 centimeters. And that allowed me to kind of, rather than just kind of stretching a bit for the arm cups, it allowed me to relax into the position a bit more. And then obviously that helped with the hip and made me sit a little bit more square on the saddle. So that was, again, another small improvement. We then tested for shorter cranks as well to see if that would again open up my hips even more. Ultimately found that whilst it did open up my hips a bit more, we went down to 1.5. I'm currently on 1.65s. We went down to 1.55s. It just felt a bit weird to me. Like it felt, obviously it would, it's a lot shorter, but we found that it made like a small difference, but for the cost of 1.55 mil cranks, it's probably not worth it. We thought we'd test all the other kind of changes that we've made first, and then we can go back to that if need be. So then the last thing that we started playing around with was saddles. Now, I was using this saddle, which is an ISM PN 2.1. Basically, where we found, actually, before that, just quickly, we also tested with the cleats. We tested a narrow stance and a wide stance, and we instantly found that I definitely need a narrow stance. When I went wider, it would just be like a lot more uncomfortable. So yeah, I had quite a narrow stance, which may lead to why this saddle basically doesn't work for me. So as you can see, this saddle starts like, okay, it's not too wide, but it instantly flares out and goes really wide. We kind of found basically that I was sitting like right on the front end of this saddle, which is usually what you do in TT position anyway, but I was like really far on the front of the saddle. So we played around with a few different saddles, and we basically found out that the Physique, I can't remember what it's called, I'll put it up on the screen, but this Physique long distance triathlon saddle was the best. The reason being because it's narrow at the start, but it stays narrow for like a lot longer down the saddle and then flares out at the back. So it allowed me to basically sit on a lot more of the saddle, which again increased stability on the bike and ultimately more comfort. So I've got that on my bike now. So once we kind of got the best position on the jig as possible for me, where I felt comfy, I looked more symmetrical. I don't think I was sitting perfectly on the bike, but Matt said that no one sits perfectly. No one's perfectly symmetrical on a bike. Everyone has little things that they do and stuff. So, but ultimately I weren't in pain, and that was the main thing. Once we got that on the jig, we took all the measurements off the jig. We then tried to replicate it as best as we could onto my Trinity. We couldn't move the bars up or down as yet because I need to get some new spacers and stuff, and that I had all of that stuff at home. We did embarrassingly find that I drilled the holes for my arm cups, but basically the arm cups that I've got, my right one was fine, and then my left one was pointing to the left slightly, which again, when you think about the fact that I was like shifting to the left a lot on the bike, doesn't help. So one thing we said is I needed to re-drill them holes and get them perfectly straight, which I have done now, and it's much better. Once we got that position, like I said, as best as we could on the bike, we got me back onto my Trinity and then kind of assessed where I was from there and found that it was a lot better than the start. If you can see here, the creases on the right hip from the right hand side of when I was on the bike on my shirt were a lot more, like there was a lot more movement in that right hip before the bike fit than after the bike fit. And this still isn't with the extra spaces in the front, by the way. So this is only really saddle adjustment and cleat adjustment. There is a lot less movement. That, I think, where all that movement and shifting around on the saddle, and my hip was kind of coming right in and closing up quite a lot, and I was shifting around on the saddle a lot more. I think that was basically causing the muscles in my hip to overwork and my glute to not be firing properly, and basically my quad and front of my hip just to be compensating for all of that. That basically concluded the bike session. Obviously there were still adjustments I needed to be made. I needed to drill the holes. I needed to lift the front end by 2 centimeters and get the Physique saddle on, which I have now since done. Although that is all done, the bike fit doesn't end there. So Matt has sent over a document basically explaining all the changes that we've done, why we've done the changes, every single bike fit measurement, the saddle height, fore, aft, the distances, a massive report. I'll put it all up on the screen of what we did basically. And it also gives you something to refer back to in the future. So if you ever change your saddle or change your saddle height or change bikes, you've got all your measurements there, which is, I think, amazing. Now, there was obviously still a lot more work to be done on my body. We found that obviously my right glute isn't firing properly. I've got tight hamstrings and tight hips in general, maybe a bit of ankle mobility as well. I needed to do all of that, and that could ultimately mean that I am sitting even better on the bike and using better muscles on the bike, so not overworking my quad and left glute, but just kind of spread it more even. So I have been doing that as well, and I've noticed even just doing that for a couple of weeks has made a big difference. Am I now comfy on the bike? I'm comfier. I still don't feel, I'm going to be completely honest, perfect on the bike. I still find that I am shifting around a little bit. That could be down to the strength and conditioning and a lack of maybe a bit of mobility work that I still need to do. My left foot does still go numb. I do find that, I'm not, that still doesn't feel like I'm 100% connected to the bike and that I can put power out through both pedals equally without feeling like I need to shift around. But I don't know if I'm still just adapting to the position. I will keep you updated and see where I'm at in a couple more weeks with more flexibility and more strength work. It definitely 100% feels better than where I was at, which is the main thing. And the biggest thing, I think, is that my hip now doesn't hurt and my knee doesn't hurt. Yeah, like it's a lot better basically. I'm actually enjoying riding my bike again, which is again probably the main thing. So do I think that £500 is worth it for a bike fit? I think that if you're, how do I put this? I think you can get a bike fit that's not at £500. I think you can get a bike fit that's £250, £300, and you will be over the moon with it. I think that £500 is extremely expensive, and I'm going to be completely honest, for a bike fit. I think that if you're not massively serious into cycling, you're just, like to go out for leisurely bike rides, I don't think you should be spending £500 on a bike fit unless you've got some serious issues. But I think that a £250 bike fit you'll be more than okay with. Do I think anyone should get a £500 bike fit? Yes, I think that if you're got a problem like me, where you've tried figuring it out, I've actually been to a bike fitter previously as well, which helped, but again, wasn't completely solving my problem. Then I think go and see someone that's an expert. Something else that Foundation Fit do, which I think makes it even more worth the £500, is they do a follow-up fit as well. So within 3 months, if you're still having some issues, you can go back for like a secondary bike fit where they'll examine you again and figure out if there's still any other issues going on, which makes it worth it, especially if you're like me and you don't know whether it's going to completely solve it. Like I said, I still don't feel truly connected to the bike. Then maybe in like 2 months' time, if I'm still having issues, I can go back and get another fit, which is a massive thing. Also, something that we didn't get to do, which was a little bit upsetting, is you get to ride around the Lee Valley Velo outdoor park thing once you've had your fit to test it out, which is good. For some reason I didn't get the opportunity to do that. I think because we used most of the time basically figuring out my issues. So that's really cool, and you can have like a real world test, which again, it makes it worth it. A lot of places you don't get to do that. Also the reports, the videos, the measurements, the everything that you get after the session, I can't fault. It's like the amount of stuff that they've sent me with knowledge, with sending me videos on, some stretches to do, some strength and mobility to do, some exercises. They've sent me so much information that's useful. It's unreal. So if you're in the market for something like that, where you want all the information which is me, it's exactly me. I wanted all the information. I wanted the videos. I wanted the measurements. I wanted all the data that I could possibly get. Then 100% worth it. Like I say, if you're just a recreational cyclist that you like to cycle on weekends, £500 is a lot of money for that. Like a hell of a lot of money. So kind of up to you to decide whether that's something that you want. But hopefully you have found this video somewhat insightful. I've probably missed a load of information. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below, and I can, I'll be more than happy to answer them. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please make sure you like, comment any questions, as I say, down below, and I'll see you next time for some more triathlon related content. Peace.